I would like a little privacy.
After more than 35 years, director Tim Burton has finally returned back with his eccentric world of Beetlejuice. Given that the 1988 film has its hold on pop culture till this day, the sequel Beetlejuice Beetlejuice is a long-awaited follow-up that reunites us with the original cast, including Michael Keaton, Winona Ryder, and Catherine O'Hara for another round of supernatural hijinks with everyone's favorite mischievous ghost. While the sequel was worth the wait and Warner Brothers is likely looking at a major box office hit, many of us still have lingering doubts if a Beetlejuice 3 might be on the horizon. If you have seen the sequel by now, you already know that the final moments of the film teased us that there might be more story left to explore in the Beetlejuice universe. Plus, Tim Burton and others have also mentioned a lot of things in their promotional interviews about the future of the franchise. So without wasting another moment, let's take a look at what it could mean for a possible third film, which should definitely be called Beetlejuice Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. Before we go into explanation, we have a very small request. If you like the content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This may be a small click for you, but for us it means an awful lot. Thank you, and now let's begin. Even if Beetlejuice 2 did not have a post-credit scene, still set the franchise up for another sequel with its over-the-top ending. Considering it took nearly 4 decades to make a second Beetlejuice movie, we didn't really expect a third to be on the table. That is, until we saw how the sequel film ends. After striking a deal with Beetlejuice to save Astrid from the afterlife, Lydia agrees to marry him. Together, they venture through the afterlife in search of Astrid, while Jeremy, her evil beau, continues to manipulate her, and as they navigate the afterlife bureaucratic maze, Beetlejuice and Lydia find themselves in the afterlife's train station, where they're trying to stop Astrid from boarding the soul train, which takes souls to the beyond. In the meantime, Astrid was tricked into switching places with Jeremy through an incantation that allowed him to return to life. When Astrid finally realizes she has been betrayed, it is already too late, but as she is about to board the soul train, she finally catches a glimpse of her worried father, Richard, working as a station employee. Luckily, Lydia and Richard step in just in time to stop Astrid from leaving forever. They also share a heartfelt moment where Richard reassures them that he is always watching over them and never wanted them to drift apart in the first place. Meanwhile, Jeremy tries to escape the afterlife and discovers that his bureaucratic agent is actually Beetlejuice, who, instead of letting him through, sends the evil menace straight to hell. With Jeremy out of the way, Lydia and Astrid finally make their way back to the living world. However, Beetlejuice, after taking care of the Jeremy issue, turns to Delia for help. She has apparently been stuck in the afterlife after a snake bite, and she needs her assistance to return to the mortal world. Now, after making it back to the real world, Lydia and Astrid show up at the church as Lydia's cringy fiancé Rory awaits at the altar. As the wedding is just about to happen, in a dramatic chapel twist, Beetlejuice shows up with Delia in tow, who had previously met her, and in a bizarre snake ritual, having underestimated the danger of the venomous snakes. Of course, Beetlejuice starts making the scene by pulling the church's influencer guests onto their phones and turning Lydia's wedding dress into the same classic shade of red among other magical antiques. He then forces Rory to confess his real motive behind marrying Lydia because this idiot, unsurprisingly, did not love her and was just along the ride for her money and status. Lydia clearly does not take it well and reacts by knocking Rory out cold. Just as Beetlejuice is about to go through with a wedding, a dead B-movie actor named Wolf Jackson bursts in with a team of supernatural cops looking to arrest Beetlejuice for breaking the rules of the afterlife. However, Beetlejuice freezes them in their tracks and takes control of the situation by making everyone sing along. Extravagant version of MacArthur Park, but to his surprise, Beetlejuice's vengeful ex-wife Dolores storms in to confront him, and I think this is the best aspect of the sequel as it has 2 completely different antagonist arcs that never really intersect until the end. Okay, now circling back, Astrid follows the handbook for the recently deceased to summon a very hungry sandworm into the church. Sadly, Beetlejuice deflects it and sends the sandworm after Dolores and Rory, resulting in them getting swallowed whole. While the sandworm handles them with ease thanks to Beetlejuice breaking the rules of the afterlife as it helps Astrid regain her power, the wedding is finally halted when Lydia and Astrid point out that Beetlejuice broke the rules of the handbook and his own contract, which fully nullifies Beetlejuice's marriage deal with Lydia, allowing her to banish him again by saying his name 3 times. With a crisis averted, Lydia and Astrid share a pretty teary moment with Delia, who peacefully transitions into the afterlife and reunites with Charles before boarding the Soul Train. So at the end of Beetlejuice, Lydia decides to quit her TV show to focus on her relationship with Astrid, and wraps up filming the final episode of Ghost House. In the final shot of the film, some time has seemed to pass when Lydia seems free from Beetlejuice and her two-faced clingy boyfriend Rory. As she embraces her newfound independence, Lydia begins to daydream and has a vivid dream of a perfect future for Astrid. While Astrid is safe for now, it is clear that Lydia's dreams are far from peaceful. We see a quick montage of their future where the two visit Dracula's castle, where Astrid falls for an employee named Vlad. They eventually get married, with Lydia proudly watching from the sidelines. She is even with Astrid when she goes into labor and ends up in the hospital. But the daydream soon turns into a nightmare as Astrid gives birth and the same Beetlejuice baby pops out that Lydia was forced to give birth to earlier in the film. It causes quite a slimy disaster as the creature leaps up, violently killing the doctor and nurses before crawling up the walls and ceiling, then landing on Astrid's chest, who gives her so-called baby an evil smile before it came straight for Lydia, but luckily she wakes up very suddenly only to realize it was all just a dream. Unfortunately, the horror is not over yet as she imagines Beetlejuice living right next to her in bed. So while panicking, she woke up again, only this time Lydia was truly alone. Now you can interpret this in a few ways. It could be a nod to the idea that Lydia never truly escapes Beetlejuice since he is already dead. Getting rid of him for good would be tough, even though it is not entirely impossible. It might also be just a playful joke, or it could be a clear hint that the green-haired ghoul is not done causing trouble and will return in the future. But there is one interesting detail in Beetlejuice 2 that could be explored in a future sequel. Now that I know if you guys picked it up, but there was a quick line about Lydia's mother in the film. During a conversation with Delia, Lydia is venting about her struggles with Astrid and how she feels Astrid blames her for Richard's death. So Delia responds by saying how Lydia blames her for Richard's death. After hearing this, Lydia was clearly frustrated and replied that her mother was actually still alive. In the first film, it seemed like Lydia was giving full time with her dad and stepmother, leading many to assume her mom had passed away. But now we know that it is not true, which raises the question about why have we never seen her and what kind of person she really is. Now, my point is, with Lydia and Astrid now in good terms and Delia having crossed over, any new conflict could explore Lydia's past. Maybe a new sequel could even bring her biological mom into the story, regardless of whether she is alive or dead, which would give Lydia the much-needed closure she has been missing most of her life. Tim Burton does not sound very optimistic about another Beetlejuice sequel. So after the 81st Venice Film Festival, the entire cast of Beetlejuice 2 and Tim Burton arrived in London for the UK premiere of Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. And during several interviews, Burton expressed his skepticism about the possibility of a Beetlejuice 3 because if the same timeline were to be followed, he would be about 100 years old, and that makes it almost impossible for him to be involved in the human production of a Beetlejuice threequel, because sadly he is just human. He also said that the reason for a movie set in 1988 is to get a sequel after 36 years in 2024 was Burton's love for the character of Lydia, portrayed by Winona Ryder. He described how as Lydia ages, the story explores themes of life changes, relationships, and personal growth, which he felt was more relevant to explore now rather than in 1989. Even the producer of the film, Tommy Harper, had previously mentioned that there had been no discussions about the future direction of the franchise as they were fully focusing on making one great movie. Instead, he expressed that the priority was to make the best film possible. In fact, upon being bickered about the questions for another potential sequel, Michael Keaton humorously questioned why people had stopped at 3. He mentioned that for a long time both he and Tim Burton had agreed not to touch the original film, preferring to leave it as its own identity, but it had taken them quite a while to find an area they felt really worked, leading to finally consider a sequel. Keaton also remarked that he had always thought the second film should have been titled Beetlejuice Beetlejuice, as it just made sense to him. Likewise, in the same interview, Jenna Ortega laughed, expressing the feeling that the world might explode if a third movie were ever made. She suggested that perhaps another film could come out after many more years, noting that it would be fun. Ortega also emphasized that one of the most special abilities or special qualities the movie has was its originality and absurdity, describing it as a fever dream as Beetlejuice is based on a very flexible environment. Comments, if it appears that Beetlejuice 3 is very unlikely to be under the direction, especially if the franchise follows a similar time frame. unless some scientists drop some sort of serum for immortality. In the next few years, however, if another director believes they can capture the essence of the franchise as effectively as Burton has, and given the positive reviews of Beetlejuice 2, some believe that there is still a slim chance for a third film. Will there be a Beetlejuice 3? With its theater-like ending of the film and Lydia's bizarre dream sequence, it surely leaves the door open for the idea that Beetlejuice might not have been completely gone after exploding like a balloon. Is probably somewhere in the afterlife trying to reach out to Lydia physically, just like he did before. Another possibility is that the baby Lydia dreamt about earlier was not just a creepy vision, but it could have been real. The biggest clue is in the title itself, which literally says Beetlejuice twice, so could a third mention and a third movie be on the way? Is Tim Burton teasing or even warning us about a second sequel, or maybe it is just a hint that Beetlejuice is always lurking somewhere, ready to stir things up again. Lydia is clearly being haunted by Beetlejuice. She might have dodged marrying him again, but he is still lurking in the afterlife. So, a third either way. It is pretty clear we have not seen the last of Beetlejuice, as both of these scenarios paved the way for a potential third movie in the Beetlejuice franchise. Plus, given how well the sequel is performing financially, it makes a lot of sense for Warner Brothers to consider a third Beetlejuice film because, after all, money talks. Beetlejuice 2 is shaping up to be quite a hit, potentially making it the third biggest box office opening of 2024. And if the film keeps pulling in numbers like that, I wonder if it would be really wise for Warner Brothers to wait for 36 years to revisit the franchise. However, Tim Burton's not getting any younger and was apparently even thinking about retirement before this film came along. Apart from that, Michael Keaton is also in his 70s and probably won't be up for playing the title character again in, say, another 30 years, unless of course there is some medical marvel invented to cheat the inevitability of life. If Beetlejuice 3 is not a top priority for Tim Burton, creatively, it would likely need to be directed by someone else in the distant future. However, that seems unlikely since both films really strive on Burton's unique vision of German expressionism and surrealism, which is hard to replicate, and it is hard to imagine Michael Keaton wanting to return without Burton at the helm. Although the bigger question here might be whether there is even enough left to explore in a third film. The new sequel did mention Lydia's real mother, who remains off-screen, and when asked about the chance of seeing that character in the future, Tim Burton simply said, "We'll see," leaving it as a possible storyline to explore. Then there's also Jenna Ortega's new character, who could potentially carry the franchise forward in a follow-up. After all, Ortega was a key factor in making Beetlejuice 2 happen. But even if the film left the door open for a potential third movie, it didn't end with a major cliffhanger, which somehow makes it clear that Burton wasn't aiming to set up another sequel with this film. He basically had a story he wanted to tell, and he told it without leaving any unresolved threads that demand a follow-up. So, if a third movie were to happen, it would be because a new story comes along that needs to be told, and given the current situation, it is hard to see that happening anytime soon. With that being said, are you guys hopeful for a complete Beetlejuice trilogy helmed by Burton through Keaton? Or was the new sequel just enough? Let us know about your thoughts in the comment box below. As always, if you liked the content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.